Very good. The regular meeting of the Lowry Hills Special Service District Advisory Board will now begin. Good morning. My name is Michael McLaughlin. I will be facilitating this meeting of the Lowry Hills Special Service District Advisory Board. Before we begin, I'd like to note that this meeting includes the remote participation of members as authorized under Minnesota Statute Section 13D.021 due to the declared local health pandemic. I will now call this meeting to order and call the roll so that we may verify the presence of a quorum. Advisory board members, when I call your name, please indicate if you are present. Tom Fletcher.
Sorry, I was muted. Present.
Very good. Steve Havoc.
Present.
Very good. Frankie Namagua does not appear to be present yet. I will also note that I am joined by Andrew Carlson with the Special Service District team at Public Works, along with David Bauer. And I will note that we do have a number of guests from the city, the city staff team for the Hennepin Avenue Reconstruction Project, who we will turn this meeting over to in just a couple of minutes, along with other public guests. Our first order of is to adopt the agenda, and if desired, the advisory board can adopt the minutes to the prior meeting. Both the draft agenda and the draft minutes to the prior meeting were included in the packet, distributed to the board and posted on the city's website. Would someone like to make a motion to approve both the proposed agenda and the draft minutes, unless there are any changes?
Motion to approve.
Is there a second? Tom, I need you. You're right. I appreciate you muting to prevent background. So
yeah, I try not to have too much background noise, but forget that I got to talk. Second.
That's very good. Thank you. With that, unless there's further discussion, I will call the roll on the motion to approve both the proposed agenda and the draft minutes, which are to the June 17, 2021 meeting. So on that motion, Tom Fletcher.
Aye.
Steve Havoc.
Aye.
And Frank has not yet joined us. Very good. The agenda and the minutes to the prior meeting are approved as distributed. With that, we will move to our first discussion and only discussion item this morning, which is a presentation from the project team on the Hennepin Avenue Reconstruction Project. They are with Public Works, with the Transportation Planning and Programming Division within Public Works. So Rebecca, I'll introduce Rebecca Hughes with the project lead, and she can introduce her fellow team members who are here. And we will turn it over to Becca. Good morning.
Good morning. Great. Thanks again for having us. It's been a while since we've seen you, but we're happy to be back. I'm again Becca Hughes with Transportation Planning and Programming. I'm joined by several other members of the project team this morning. So Alan Klugman from Traffic and Parking Services, also Jonette Kunal with Kimley Horn, Adam Hale from Transportation Engineering and Design, as well as Amy Barnstar from Transportation Planning and Programming. So I know a couple of you, at least, were at the meeting that we had yesterday, so some of the information that we share with you this morning is going to be repeat, but the presentations are somewhat similar to other presentations, obviously, that we're giving to stakeholder groups. So be patient and bear with us. And Jonette, are you ready to share your screen?
It looks like I don't have permissions to share.
One moment. There, does that help?
Yep, that looks like it'll work.
Thanks again for having us this morning. So just to share a quick agenda in terms of topics that we intend to cover, we'll start with a quick project overview. We'll share the recommended design for the corridor and discuss some of the technical analysis and support that led to that decision. We'll conclude with project schedule and questions. So I know that most of you are well familiar with this, but just to recap, it's about a 1.3 mile segment on Hennepin Avenue. It's a reconstruction project with Douglas Avenue on the north and Lake Street on the south. There are 3 neighborhood groups that we've been working with throughout this process, as well as 2 special service district groups and the Uptown Business Association. We've engaged with people through open houses, through the various rounds of engagement for the project, and received thousands of comments on the project to date. In terms of the policy plans, and this is a slight recap from where we started over a year ago, right? With our first round of engagement was really where we shared some of the details of the policy plans, and those presentations are all available on the public website. But just as a brief recap, how we get to recommended designs for corridors is first we start with policy plans, which are then informed by technical analysis as well as public feedback. But really the basis or the foundation for how we develop designs are based on the policy plans that have been adopted by the City Council. So we have the Climate Action Plan, the 20-year Streets Funding Plan, which is basically how we prioritize where we make capital investments throughout the city, the Complete Streets policy, the overarching Minneapolis 2040 plan, our recently adopted Transportation Action Plan, which is a 10-year vision for the city, our Vision Zero Action Plan, as well as our Street Design Guide. So those are the major policy elements. In terms of feedback, as I noted, and again, this is a very broad brush, but we received many comments. Many of them were competing. And I think, one of the things that we've shared from the very beginning is that we do have a finite amount of space. There's a limited amount of right of way, and there are a lot of competing interests. And what we heard throughout this process in terms of competing comments, we simply can't address them in all on one layout due to the fact that there's just a limitation of space within the public right of way. Some of the major themes, however, that we've heard include support for bicycle facility on Hennepin Avenue, concern that there's not enough on-street parking provided. There was support for bus lanes as well as transit priority elements such as signalization. We heard concerns about traffic congestion on Hennepin Avenue and what it would mean for traffic flow with a reduction in through lanes for motor vehicles. And then also the implications for circulation on neighborhood streets. We heard interest in having more greening for the corridor, not just green infrastructure, but also different elements that could allow for sidewalk cafes and other sort of street activation measures. And we also heard, especially at the beginning of the project, request to delay the project, not just for design, but also for construction, which we were able to accomplish by working with our federal funding partners. The street itself is nearly 65 years old, so it was last constructed in 1957, and there were numerous issues that we needed to address when we first started looking at this corridor. I'll get into the details of those later, but this is basically a summary chart of all of the different issues that we were trying to deal with within, again, a confined amount of space, and how well that we've been able to address them with the proposed layout. So this is basically a summary. And I should also note that there's a much longer presentation that has more slides, more detailed information that is available on the public website now. But again, this is just an abbreviated version for our stakeholder group so that you don't have to listen to the entire thing, and instead we can get to questions and answers to those questions following the presentation. I'll turn it over to Jonette to run through some of those details.
The key elements of the layout are summarized on this slide. So one of the things that we were trying to accomplish is to have consistent sidewalk space through the corridor. There are some really constrained sidewalks and pinch points along the corridor today. The recommended design does have a two-way sidewalk level bikeway, so behind the curb on the east side of Hennepin Avenue. There are two full-time transit lanes, which are shown in red on the snip on this slide. There are two vehicle lanes, one in each direction, with left turns at key intersections, which is something that doesn't exist today, is the left turn lanes. At the north end of the corridor and the south end of the corridor, so near Franklin Avenue and then between Lagoon and Lake, the traffic really showed that there was a need for additional capacity. So that's why you see additional vehicle lanes recommended in those segments. Parking and loading was provided in bays on Hennepin Avenue where that fit within the right of way. And then one other note was just that we were trying to preserve existing trees where that was possible. So the previous slide kind of gave you a bird's eye view of a snip of the layout. This is giving just a slightly different view, which is really more looking down the street. So you can see each of those elements that I talked about and how that space is allocated along the corridor. So this is a typical section, sort of mid-block. You can see a couple things I'll just point out here. There is proposed to be a median along most of Hennepin Avenue. We'll talk more about that, but that really is a key safety feature. And then you can also see the bikeway on the east side, the two-way bikeway with typical section being boulevard between sidewalk and bikeway. I'll go to the next slide where you can see this is what the section looks like with a left turn lane, and just illustrates that there are cases where the bikeway is next to the sidewalk. And then this is the section, this is one of our most constrained sections, but this shows how parking and loading bays are fit into the section as well.
So in terms of pedestrian design, in terms of the existing conditions, and we've said this before, this isn't going to be new, but the Hennepin Avenue, the corridor as it exists currently is on the high injury network, which essentially means that pedestrians are overrepresented in injury crashes. As you also know, there are narrow sidewalks in some blocks, especially in the northern portion of the corridor. And with the newly adopted Transportation Action Plan, Hennepin Avenue is on the city's pedestrian priority network. In terms of the overall recommended design, we are reducing the overall cross section on Hennepin Avenue. It's currently 60 feet curb to curb, and we'll be reducing that about 6 to 10 feet, so 50 to 54 feet. We do have a couple of nice pedestrian crossing elements, specifically at Fremont Avenue and 25th and a half Street, where we intend to signalize. There are curb extensions that are provided on cross and intersecting streets to help narrow those crossing distances and to make that safer. Those are included where feasible, but you'll notice on the layout that exists on the project website that we don't have those on Hennepin because of the fact that we have curbside running bus lanes. As Jonette mentioned, we have medians included throughout the corridor that reduce conflicts at driveways and preclude those left-hand turns that are occurring mid-block and creating a lot of congestion and conflicts. We were able to work with 7 property owners along the corridor to either close access points where parking lots had multiple access points to Hennepin Avenue, or were able to do those types of consolidations. And then the typical section, as Jonette just mentioned, is 8-foot sidewalks from Lake to Franklin. It's narrow at some of the constrained points, of course, and then 6-foot sidewalks north of Franklin is the typical. In terms of bicycle design, as you currently know, there's no dedicated bicycle facility currently on the Hennepin Avenue corridor, but similarly to the pedestrian design, it's on the city's high injury network as it relates to, sorry, I can't see until that guest is admitted, sorry. Hennepin Avenue is the bicycles are overrepresented in injury crashes. It's on the All Ages and Abilities Bicycle Network as identified in the Transportation Action Plan. The recommended design, as Jonette touched on, is a sidewalk level 2-way protected facility on the east side of Hennepin Avenue. It's typically 10 feet wide. However, it is 8 feet at some of the constrained locations. And that design does allow for the connection with future protected bikeways on those cross and intersecting streets, especially to the east currently of Hennepin Avenue. I would just say that we also evaluated bike facilities on parallel streets, but really it was inconsistent with our adapted city policies and goals. And there were also a lot of trade-offs that were affiliated with doing that as well. And we also evaluated one-way bikeways. So instead of having a 2-way bike facility, on the east side of the corridor, we looked at separating those into individual bikeways on both the east and west sides, but we just simply didn't have enough space. In terms of transit design, and we worked very closely with Metro Transit throughout this process. Again, they receive, a ton of information via their AVL system, so they have unlimited amounts of data as it relates to being able to calculate metrics relative to their transit performance. The existing bus-only lanes that were put out that are dynamic, that exist on the corridor today, that were fully implemented in 2019 but piloted in 2018, do reduce travel times 15 to 18% and have improved transit reliability by 50 to 75%. So they have been working very well. We do anticipate that with the implementation of the E-Line BRT, which will happen in conjunction with this project, so we will be building those stations and have planned for those station locations with this project beginning in 2024. We expect that ridership will be consistent with the growth of ridership along existing BRT corridors, specifically the A and the C line. We do know that based on some analysis that we've done in terms of origin and destination, that a lot of the transit riders actually do have a destination on or near the Hennepin Avenue corridor. So they are using transit to get to destinations. In addition, the Transportation Action Plan, again, that was recently adopted, Hennepin Avenue is on our transit priority network moving forward. In terms of recommended design, again, as Jonette mentioned, we're proposing 24/7 full-time dedicated transit lanes from Douglas Avenue to the Uptown Transit Station. They don't extend all the way to Lake because of the issues that we had mentioned earlier regarding just capacity, short block lengths, etc. There will be 3 BRT stations on the corridor, so 3 station locations, 6 total stations in the east or in the north-south direction, specifically at Franklin and 25th Street for the new, and then we'd be using the existing facilities at the Uptown Transit Station. That would be accompanied by a reduced number of local stops, which is typical for upgrades to BRT service. I should also mention too, and this is just sort of a random statistic that we checked in with Metro Transit on regarding BRT ridership. Through the end of 2020, the BRT service retained 76% of the pre-pandemic ridership. So what that is showing is that despite the fact that due to the pandemic, there's been overall reductions in transit ridership, specifically on the BRT corridors, they have performed extremely well at nearly 76% of those pre-pandemic levels.
So then looking a bit at the vehicle design, a couple of the issues in the existing conditions, there are 2 vehicle lanes in each direction. Those 2 vehicle lanes don't necessarily operate very well. There's buses pulling in and out of traffic, so you often see vehicles sort of changing lanes to move around a bus. Then there are frequent left turners kind of in that left of the 2 through lanes. And so there's also a lot of lane changing going around left turners. So it's really uneven and can be really congested. That does contribute to some of the crashes that we see in this corridor. Left turns are restricted at almost all the signals from 7 to 9 and 4 to 6. So that is something that was an issue that we wanted to look at. As we've mentioned a few times, Hennepin Avenue is on the city's high injury network, not only for pedestrian and bicycle crashes, but vehicle crashes as well. And then it is on the city's, Hennepin Avenue is on the city's freight network. So the recommended design does have 1 through lane in each direction. The buses are moved out of that through lane to help separate out those uses. And then we have left turns at key intersections where there are left turn lanes. Those left turns are allowed at all times of the day. So there's no restrictions on when those left turns can be made. There is a median for most of the corridor to reduce left turn conflicts. And then as we've talked about, additional lanes at the north end and the south end to help address or to provide capacity for vehicle movements. So this slide just has just a graphic showing where left turn lanes are included in the recommended layout. They're at 22nd Street, 24th Street, 26th Street, 28th Street, and then Lagoon and Lake on the south end. In terms of parking, there are 311 on-street parking spaces between Douglas Avenue and Lake Street today. We did also look at the overall parking resources within 1 block of Hennepin Avenue, meaning on-street spaces, parking lots, and parking ramps. And the total along the corridor is 3,600 spaces. So the recommended layout includes 20 spaces provided in parking and loading bays. And we certainly recognize that that is not enough spaces to meet some of the business and the resident needs. And so the recommendation includes district parking solutions. Those district parking solutions include things to better manage that parking resource on the street, not just on Hennepin, but on some of the cross streets and the adjacent blocks. So those things could include meters, short-term zones on both Hennepin and on other streets. That's shown on the graphic on this slide in the yellow shaded blocks. those are sort of the areas we've targeted. Certainly, there may be other blocks identified, but that was our starting point. And those were really identified based on the existing parking resources. So where there were fewer parking spaces in lots or ramps or adjacent to businesses, we looked at this district parking solutions. And these two graphics side by side just kind of are a different way to illustrate that of how we looked at the existing parking resources, all the spaces that are available along the corridor, and then how we identified where parking spaces could be provided on Hennepin Avenue within the right-of-way, and then, as I mentioned, the district parking strategies. There are a number of things that are not addressed on the recommended layout. So we're still, although we've been going for a couple of years now, we're still relatively early in the design process. So some of the things that are addressed during final design include what happens in the green space. That does include the pocket parks. The recommended design layout largely leaves the pocket parks as they exist today, but that certainly is something to be explored in final design, as well as any desires for enhanced streetscape. Stormwater and green infrastructure is addressed later in design, some of the intersection design details, and then construction staging as well. On our schedule, we're here in January of 2022. We are in our third round of engagement since 2020. We are anticipating that Public Works would bring forward the recommended layout to City Council in Q1 of 2022, so February, March timeframe. Then there's final engineering that would happen through 2022 and 2023. With construction anticipated to begin in 2024. Becca already mentioned this, but there is a lot more information than more slides and other documents that have more details that are posted on the website, which is minneapolismn.gov/project/Hennepin South. There is a comment form that's open now and will be open through January 28th. And with that, we can wrap up the presentation and transition to questions.
Great. Becca, Jeanette, thank you. So as we typically do, we'll allocate the first part of the question period to advisory board members, and then when desired, we can transition into the public comment period on the agenda if some of the guests would also like to make comments. So to the advisory board members, Steve and Tom, questions.
I have questions and comments. My first comment to this board is that I had people that were on the meeting yesterday, and it seemed like this was something that you were going to move forward with, despite the comments that are coming in from businesses and property owners that you were going to go to the city council no matter what. Have you guys taken into consideration the building owners without parking and a tremendous amount of vacant space on Hennepin right now that we're unable to rent based on economy and just uptown in general, and how we are going to pay our taxes? I'm $11 a foot just for taxes in my little building on 28th and Hennepin. And how are we going to pay those taxes when we can't rent 50% of the building with this type of thing? And I'm sure there's going to be some sort of an assessment. So I guess my question is, are you taking into consideration the comments from the business owners in your process, or are you just going to move forward for a vote and the hell with the business owners?
I'll start, and then maybe I'll pass it off to either Jonette or Alan just to kind of break up the speaking. This is an informed part of the engagement process, right? So we've done rounds of engagement. We received thousands of comments, and yes, we have considered feedback from business owners, and now we have a recommended design. So the recommended design certainly can be tweaked and adjusted, but the primary elements that are included in the design is what Public Works is going to be advancing as a department. So this is the recommended layout that we would be moving forward. The purpose of providing feedback now is to share that with decision makers, right? So they're going to get all of the feedback that has been received since 2020, so thousands and thousands of comments, which they'll be able to sift and sort through. And this additional round of engagement is to inform you of the recommendation that we're advancing and for all of the stakeholders to be able to provide their feedback on the design and to share that with those that are making the decision, and that is the City Council. In terms of addressing business, parking concerns, et cetera, you know, we obviously just talked about that in the presentation. So if there are specific questions, you know, I don't know, Alan or Jonette, if you want to address things more generally than we did already in the presentation, but if you have specific comments, we're happy to address those.
Well, let me just interject with you. So the feedback that I got was that there are comments and you are now in the design period and you don't really care about the comments because the designs don't have parking. So what's going to happen is you're going to cripple the businesses, you're going to cripple the building owners, and then you're going to force parking into the neighborhoods, so where we're going to have critical parking. I sit on Humboldt and Lagoon, and I watch the bike path, and I haven't seen one bike go by yet, and I see maybe 5 a day. So killing the businesses for bikes just doesn't make sense to me. And then we just sold the other side of 28th and Hennepin, the Fratelloni Hardware building. That was our family building. And when you said, you made the comment, one of you people made the comment of, we have been in collaboration with property owners for closing parking accesses. We were told without exception that it absolutely had to close one of the 2 driveways. That was not a collaboration, it was a mandate, and it was like the Gestapo. We had to close one of our driveways. So this is a very, very sad commentary on how things are going, and I'm extremely disappointed with the people with the lack of statistics on 25 below zero weather in the bike lanes and killing businesses and killing uptown further. You guys single-handedly killed an Apple store. So you did not collaborate, you mandated driveways, and Hennepin Avenue is 65 years old, but they just resurfaced it within the last 20 years. So your guys are dealing off the bottom of the deck, and I'm a business owner, I'm a property owner, I'm a person that's fought like a dog to maintain Minneapolis property owners' values and lifestyles. I live right by Lake of the Isles. I watch the bike lanes. I am so disappointed with the way you guys are handling this. You are telling us, you are not asking us. So as a board member, I am extremely, extremely, extremely disappointed with the city and the process. Thank you.
Steve, thank you. Tom?
Can I answer one of those questions actually, Michael? So Steve, thanks. I just want to speak about that property that you recently sold at Fratelloni's. Jonette and I had conversations, I don't think ever with you. We had them with a prospective buyer. We did tell him that we wanted the curb cut closed. And in fact, we were able to come to a solution in which there's actually more parking in that parking lot as a result of the closure of the curb cut. So it came out working just fine through multiple meetings, and he was amiable to doing this as part of this project. Yeah. So well, that's what happened through those conversations.
I talked to Howard Burger 5 or 10 times a day, and there was a mandate, and it had to be, you had to figure it out because you were going to close one no matter what. So thank you for adding spaces in there. But it was not a back and forth. It was a mandate from the Public Works, and you guys are tough. So I have to stay away from it. But I am in the middle of this, and you guys are gonna kill uptown businesses and property owners. Thanks. Sorry, Mike.
No, We only have a finite amount of time, Steve, and I feel like you've had an opportunity to make your comment. Tom is the other board member present. Do you have comments, questions?
Well, I have comments that'll go longer than Steve, or questions. So is that okay or not really? Because I want to give Steve his fair time. I don't want to cut him off.
No, I'm finished, Tom. Thanks.
Okay. So I have a bunch of questions. Is that okay, Michael? And I'll try and leave room for everybody else at the end for any audience, people, other participants. Okay. First of all, is it safe to assume that the goal is a win-win for a project like this, for trying to get to a win-win for different interests generally?
We're always striving to try and meet the goals and objectives of all of the different stakeholder groups, which we've expressed to you on numerous occasions is very complicated. And again, as we mentioned in the presentation, it's impossible to address all of the conflicting comments in one layout. So yes, that is always the hope, and we know that that's not always possible, especially in this circumstance.
Yeah. And what is the feedback? I mean, was it safe to say that the feedback from the business property community has not been that they feel that this is not a plus for them, that this is a total negative? Is that safe to say based on your feedback in general? Majority? The
feedback that we've received from businesses have expressed concerns about parking throughout all rounds of engagement. That is accurate.
Okay. Is also the goal when you do a project like this to be somewhat holistic and to look at sort of all factors and everything else in sort of a holistic basis? Is that kind of a goal too?
As I shared with you earlier in the presentation, the foundation of this is the policy guidance, right? That is adopted by the City Council. We do a slew of technical analysis, and then we also complement that effort with public feedback. Okay.
And in terms of the policy guidance, can you specifically sort of say, you have these guidance, you have these goals, specifically how the project meets those goals, given the concerns by the business community, helps to know what are the positives, what are you achieving? Could you be specific on that?
Well, I can tell you, Tom, and you know this because we've had probably at least 20 interactions throughout this entire process, that we've got all of the information regarding policy basis, not all of the information, but snippets from the different policies in the earlier presentations, right? So I'm not going to go through every single policy document that we showed on that slide, in which there are 8, and try and share every nuance. But what I can say is that through the Transportation Action Plan, we've got mode split goals, we have VMT reduction goals. This plan helps to achieve that. There are also many other goals related to equity as it relates to transportation. We have complete streets, which is a hierarchy for how we prioritize use of space within the public right of way. I mean, it's endless, and we've talked about this at length before. I'd either encourage you to review, some of the earlier presentations that we did that have some of that specific policy language identified, but we've gone over this several times.
Well, maybe I'll just jump in for a moment, if I may, on the policies. And sure. I have little to add to Beck, other than maybe I'll say something from my own words and my own frame of mind. Is I think our proposed design, and again, it's a proposed design of the Public Works Department, strongly meets City Council policy goals. I mean, I'll just say that very directly. As Becca noted, this project is highly policy driven. We've shared that with you. It's obviously informed with our technical analysis and the public feedback, but it starts with the policy goals, and every single design element that we have in here strongly pegs back to what those goals and direction are. And those are the goals and directions set by the City Council and the mayor that we work for, and that's really guided us for 2 years here. So, I mean, I just want to sum that up. Any question relative to policy and what drives our work, we looked at many layouts and concepts and alternatives. We did our homework, and we always pegged back to, are we meeting the key policy goals? So I just can't stress that enough, Tom, that's what drives our work, and that's the foundation of what we have here.
I get what you're saying, and I hear you, but I'm going to go pick on one policy goal. And I asked about this in a meeting yesterday, but I never got an answer. You got climate, okay? That's a key policy goal, right? Is that a fair statement?
Yes. How
does this project address climate specifically in terms of reducing emissions, and have you studied that?
No.
Do you have any specifics? Because I can give you specifics, and I'm just trying to figure out what you have.
Yeah, no, and then time, and I know we had a bit of a back and forth yesterday, and maybe with respect to time, we don't want to go too much into details here. But if I may say so,
I would ask the detail. Please give me the detail, because you didn't give it yesterday.
And maybe that detail wants to come at another time. But when you challenge us on things like climate and emission control and so forth, literally everything I can do, everything we can do to support other modes. We're supporting walking and pedestrians with this layout. That pegs back to climate action. We're supporting bikes. That pegs back to climate action. We're supporting transit throughput, transit efficiency, the attractiveness of transit. We're supporting a 14-mile E-line bus rapid transit that's going to have impacts throughout the metro. And all of that I would submit to really does peg back to climate action and vehicle emissions. So, you know, we may agree to disagree on this, Tom, and we can send you data. I think we have already. But I guess I want to politely say this, that I challenge your assumption that this design does not address climate action. I think it strongly does.
Okay, so I'll give you a couple facts and then we'll move on to the next question. Okay, and could you please send me the data? Can I get it this week or next week, possibly? I'd love to receive it. Will you send me the data, number one?
Yeah, I mean, let's chat about that. I believe you had the data request. I think we sent you the data we've gathered with Metro Transit. I'm somewhat at a loss as to what you're asking for, but let's not talk about that today. No, we have 20 minutes.
Okay, we don't want to. Okay, I'm not trying to sound argumentative, but okay, I'm going to read you a quote from the Met Council from their latest transportation plan. It's shown on table 12 on mobile, and this is related to the proposed build of Line E and the BRT lines. It's page 31 of their draft of their transportation policy plan amendment. As shown in table 12, on-road mobile source emissions are projected to be significantly lower than 2015 performance under each scenario, and scenarios are with the projected BRTs, so the BRTs are thrown in. They then say it is due to an increase in electric vehicle adoption and a vehicle fleet featuring automobiles that pollute less than existing automobiles. So Met Council, which is not transit unfriendly, they're the ones who operate the system, are basically saying electric vehicles are driving our decreases. What is your plan? Many of the buildings, and I'll ask some other questions later, what does your plan do to provide many of the buildings, such as ones I'm involved with in properties, do not have room off street for charging? We have residents, 80-90% of our residents have cars. Presumably, hopefully they're going to convert to electric cars to all our benefit. Does your plan allow any room for charging stations or putting something on the thing because you've overfilled the network? What's the options for charging down the road for people who don't have off-street parking and big lots and so forth? Or is that foreclosed?
No, and Tom, I may be a little bit confused here. Are you specifically talking about publicly available charging stations along Hennepin?
Well,
I'm just confused.
Yeah, potentially, if I look at this plan, there's no room to add that in the future, and you have a whole bunch of vintage buildings that do not have room, and residents who do need cars have historically had cars. We surveyed, Otherland surveyed 80 to 90% of our residents have vehicles or buildings. If we're thinking 50 years down the road, what provisions, thoughts are being about charging? There's this national push at the national level for more charging stations. We've taken a very constrained street, and now what happens for those folks who want to live in the older buildings, and what do we do?
So Tom, I thank you. I think I better understand the theme of your questions. Big topic here, right? Probably could be a whole 2-hour discussion in itself. Let me say a few quick things. The city strongly supports electric vehicles and charging opportunities for those vehicles. I think you may be aware of this. We're partnering with St. Paul. That was part of a federal grant, long story, but we're putting in, I think the number is 32 charging stations throughout the city. I might be wrong on that number, please don't quote me, but it's in the tens of range. It's kind of phase one. We're starting the rollout of publicly available charging stations. Some of them coexist with a shared car system. Some of them are for purely private use. So I just, quick point here, I want to say the city supports electrification, and to the degree that our infrastructure interacts with that, we support that. I guess where I maybe question part of your assumption is, we've been very clear in terms of the, I'll say, assignment of real estate along Hennepin and how much we propose, we recommend to be devoted to parking. So, we do have the parking bays that we're proposing. I think a much later topic would be, do they not get electrification? But I don't think there's any momentum to say, put out parking along Hennepin in order to put out electric charging in those locations. It kind of goes counter to our use of curb space and real estate and priority of modes on what we want to put along Hennepin. So kind of a little bit of I don't know what I'm saying, just kind of like a combination of issues there. We support electrification and those opportunities, but where it properly fits in with other parking resources, I think that's where it has to mesh.
Okay, so the plan really, what I just heard is despite a big national push in the Met Council tell me if I'm wrong, push, there is no thought given to potential along this busy corridor and you have a whole bunch of residents there. What do we do for, and this gets to my second point is what, if a building has a lot of parking, like Kowalski's is an example, they were on the call yesterday, you know what, this isn't a real big deal. I would maintain, I'm curious if you agree that the vintage buildings, the ones that are right up against the street, provide some of the character of Hennepin. I'm sure you're well familiar with the project. Is that a fair statement, or am I totally off on that the older buildings would help provide the character of the city? The building Steve's and his family has there, or those would help provide the character of the street and keep it from being a suburban street?
I don't know if anyone else on the team wants to join in. I mean, I guess, Tom, I'm not going to question your analysis of what the corridor looks like or the context of the corridor. We've all been out there.
And what's your folks' opinion? You're from the city and you're doing a design and it impacts the corridor. What's your general opinion from a design standpoint?
Again, I'm maybe a little confused on what the exact question is.
Okay, if as designers and you're designing a street, what provides the character on Hennepin? If you have to look to the elements that provide character on Hennepin, what provides the current character on Hennepin? What contributes the most?
Tom, yeah, I mean, Tom, that clearly is a matter of opinion. I don't know that's something that Public Works can take a position or have a statement on.
Well, the point is that the older buildings on Hennepin, and maybe you don't want to acknowledge that or recognize that, but I would say most people are, that's what gives it the character. You look at Steve's building at 28th and Hennepin, it's a beautiful building, okay? It's what gives the street its character. I mean, you can, if you want strip malls, you can go to all kinds of other places, okay? You look at where Cafe Meow is, you know, Jessica and there's on the call. Those would give the street its character and feel. Those are the buildings that will be most disadvantaged by this design. And has any consideration been given to that in the analysis? How do you
so, Tom, I think I better understand your question. Yeah, I'm sorry for jumping in, Tom. I think I may better understand your question now. And I think one thing I want to say, and I know this came up in the call yesterday, I think it bears repeating because I think it needs to be said, is that, you know, we do want to work with the businesses, the property owners, the landlords, the tenants, and we want to preserve the businesses and work with them. And I think, you know, let's be open about that. Let's be partners. I think there needs to be some change in thinking. If the parking resources change, we're not saying parking's going away. There's going to be a change in operation, a change in opportunities, a change in how we look at the overall corridor and its adjoining streets. And, you know, you reference Cafe Meow, you could reference many others. Steve, I'm just not, we say 20th and Hennepin, you'd have to say which corner you are, you know, so I know exactly what building we're talking about. But I mean, we are absolutely committed, and I've said this many times, and I'm very sincere about this, we're absolutely committed to working with the business associations, the special service districts, every individual property owner to understand what the parking needs are and how they can be accommodated through a system that may not be at your front door anymore, but how it can be accommodated through a system and the resources in the corridor. So we're not walking away from these buildings. I don't think that's a fair impression. And we've been very open in saying, you know, I mean, we showed the graphic with the side street parking and the notion of district parking. I mean, we're working on, I'd say, opportunities and activities to help support the businesses. And I think there just needs to be an acknowledgement of that. There needs to be a partnership here moving forward because we're willing to do our part and we've committed to that. And I feel that needs to be acknowledged.
I'm going to jump in here.
Part of the plan.
Tom, just 1 second. I'm just noting, we're at about 15 minutes left of our meeting time. I just wanted to check in with the board members. We can continue with board Q&A. Otherwise, we do have a public comment period on the agenda. I don't know if any of the members, any of the guests joining us want to address the board, but I wanted to just ask how the board would like to proceed. Steve, I see you have your hand up. So,
yes, you know, it's. You say that you want to work with the building owners and you're taking into consideration the comments, but yet you're not having any other proposal to the city or to us other than what you've got. You've got one proposal and then you've got two versions of the same proposal. That does not sound like compromise. And all of our businesses and all of our transportation needs, et cetera, has changed in the last 2 years with pandemics. So, you know, the city council, you keep falling back on, we're working for the city council and our mayor, that, you know, those things have all changed from 2 years ago. So if you're working on a mandate, you have to be able to be flexible with the times. And right now we are trying to be flexible, and I've got 50% of the building vacant. So pushing more parking on 28th Street and into the neighborhoods is going to cause a critical parking shortage. We'll have to have stickers for the neighbors. We don't have parking in front of our house on 28th and Humboldt now, because we've got huge buildings on the other side of the mall. So all you're doing is you're squeezing frosting out of the deal and into different places without coming up with a second or a third option. You have two options, and they're different. All they're doing is they're the same thing with no flexibility or listening to the people. So you're wrong. You're wrong with saying you're trying to listen, with coming up with only one plan.
And can I, Steve, the thing's been going on for 2 years. If there was a plan, it would have been, if there was, and I think it's tougher. I think the problem is, and you probably know as well as I do, to say that to go and do district parking is a lot tougher to make work than, it sounds great, but the devil is in the details. And I have not seen, if the city is initiating a project and taking the parking off the street, it would behoove the city to then have also at the same time said, okay, we know this is coming, to have started putting the things in and had those discussions and seeing if there are property owners who are willing to make their properties available on a long-term 50-year basis, if this is a 50-year project, to do that. And I have not seen that at all. It's great to talk about it, but it would be, you know, you're going down this road and there's this huge elephant in the room that gets said, hey, we have a solution, but we haven't seen hide nor hair nor one thing of the solution yet. And by the way, Steve's building is the Eilsbahn building. That's, Steve, I'm correct, right? The building with Eilsbahn, everybody knows where Eilsbahn is. The point is that I don't know, you know, I mean, then, okay, what's the solution for that building is an example, you know, in terms of something that actually works. What's the solution to get on the street? And we haven't, you know, so it's tough to believe a solution, particularly when you look at Lake to 31st and you see what's happened there and you go, we don't want to join that club.
So maybe to respond to a couple of the points there. So when Alan is talking about working with individual or working with businesses and property owners, I think that the project team has been clear that on-street parking for the length of Hennepin Avenue, which is a lot of what we've heard, that's not feasible within any of the options. And so, working with individual businesses really means what are your specific needs and what is in the toolbox. But what's in the toolbox isn't, 300 parking spaces on Hennepin Avenue. It needs to be other strategies. So that would be one piece. The other piece, when we're talking about district parking solutions, I don't think the city is proposing to acquire private property or use private property. There certainly are on-street strategies, and the city through CPED or other departments may be able to facilitate cooperation between private property owners, but the city is not planning to acquire property for parking. Just to clarify that.
So we have a problem. Normally, if I have a problem that's created by taking away on-street parking, normally what I would hope is the city would then give me the plan for, before going down the road of this thing, would give me the plan for the solution to the problem so that we could see and evaluate that, decide whether this option makes sense. We've got a problem being created. We have talk of a potential solution, but we don't have visibility to a solution, which is so critical to businesses, and I question whether it really is in hand. I mean, that's, so the thing is, this project goes down as whatever, and it gets past a certain point, and even if there is no solution, the property owners, businesses, residents on Hennepin are stuck. And why don't I shut up for a second? Oh, actually, let me make one other comment.
Can I just jump in quickly?
One other quick comment. So I've asked a bunch of questions about goals, whatever. I have not, in this whole thing, received one single concrete answer or to my questions. It's always been, well, we've talked about that, we've heard about that. I just FYI, I have not really received a concrete answer or solution, but yeah. Okay, thank you.
I don't understand that last comment at all, Tom. But I just want to say that in regard to the district parking solutions, I think, we mentioned this yesterday. I don't think we mentioned it today on this meeting. District parking solutions are different for the city, right? This project is making us think differently about parking resources. There are ordinances that we need to change. There's cooperation with businesses. This project isn't starting for 2 years. We have the time to do it. There is a commitment from Public Works to do that. And we know that from discussions with our management and leadership. So while we don't have every answer, we expect that the next 2 years are going to be about fleshing out these district parking solutions adjacent to the corridor. And that's just a fact. So we have time to do this. That is an intent of the project team to continue to work with business owners, and we've been very transparent about that.
We have 7 minutes left, and we do have a guest that has indicated they would like to address the advisory board. Is everybody comfortable with giving some time to the guest for the public comment period and moving on to that piece? Okay, I'll take that as a yes. With that, the first person and only person I have in queue at this point is Jacqueline Williams, who would like to address the advisory board. Jacqueline, good morning. I think I might need to unmute you.
Jackie, unmute.
We still aren't hearing you, Jackie. You need to unmute yourself.
Can you unmute her?
I tried. I do not have that. Teams does not have that functionality, so I'm not able to unmute her.
Okay, while you're trying to unmute her, let me just have one other comment. If in fact,
Steve, could I just, sorry, because we've entered the public comment period. Are there any other guests who have joined us while Jacqueline is working on her phone that would like to make a comment to the advisory board? No obligation. I want to ask the question. I don't see any. Aaron and Jessica. Aaron, I saw your hand go up first. So Aaron, if you're able to, you were able to unmute. So Aaron, per our rules, you have up to 3 minutes.
Yes, and you can hear me?
Yes, thank you. Okay.
I just also wanted to point out, I think it's maybe been alluded to, but not so explicit. I think, I think it's just worth entering into the record that based on the conversations that I've been part of these meetings for the last, for the entire, basically the entire engagement period, the last year and a half. And, I think it just bears going on the record, at least, that, because this is a public works driven project, the goals are very much, in my, from what I've been able to tell, very much public works goals. The policies that they're following, as I can tell them, are very much public works types of policies. It's related to basically bodies move through a corridor in different modes of transportation as efficiently as possible, or kind of the, summary of the goals. I know, there's other things out there like climate, which, again, we haven't really heard specifics on, but it's, it's part of a framework. But, in terms of where I'm going with this is just in terms of how they're measuring goals and how they're assessing what's successful or not in this project. I don't believe there are any kind of economic development types of goals or any types of, business health types of goals that they've really been trying to work for. So I think the solutions that were shown in this proposal, I think, are very much transit and transportation oriented types of, solutions that have been presented, and they just don't take into account, I think, other objectives that the city might have in terms of, sort of what a vibrant community economic node means. So I don't really have a question. I think, and certainly if it sparks the conversation or someone wants to speak on that, they can, but I don't believe that Public Works has really looked at any economic goals or has any economic goals for this project. It's just simply a matter of transportation and throughput on people. So that's my comment. Thank you.
Mike, can you hear me now?
Yes, I want to make, I didn't know if anybody wanted to respond to that comment. Otherwise, Jacqueline, did you dial in? Are you 224?
I dialed in.
Very good. We'll go to you next since you were first, and then Jessica will come back to you since Jacqueline had raised her hand first.
Okay, I'll try to.
Go ahead, Jacqueline.
Yeah, so we support Tom and Steve We've lived on Hennepin Avenue for 17 years. You aren't listening. No one is listening. We attended an open house in March of this past year, and it was the same thing. The details will come. No, we haven't looked at the impact on neighborhoods, surrounding neighborhoods. Details will come. Everything is being pushed off until it's too late. You say you're following policy goals of the city council. That was a city council that advanced personal interest over the interests of constituents. We have a new city council now, and many of us are going to be involved with our city council members in opposing this project. I'm not sure what our options are, but you need to start listening. You said you've gathered thousands of comments, and there's no response. There's no response. We rely on DoorDash, Shipt, Amazon, UPS. Our car was totaled by a snowplow last year, and we decided not to get a car. So we rely totally on Uber and Lyft. We need parking and parking in front of our building. And I don't think, I think it was Steve who said you're crippling Uptown for the sake of bicyclists. And I know bicyclists who don't even support this plan. So that's all I'll say. We will continue to be involved, but you need to start listening. Thank you.
Very good. Jacqueline, thank you. I think we'll move next in the interest of time to Jessica Burge, or Burge, I apologize if I'm pronouncing your last name incorrectly, Jessica. Jessica, the floor is yours.
Can you all hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to say, as a business owner, hearing that the Public Works team believes that they've been working with businesses and property owners is laughable to me. I have not seen that at all, and I don't feel that. When you said business needs will be accommodated by the system, I don't see that either. And I think Tom made some really good points about parking as well that I believe the team of Public Works needs to consider. For my business and the businesses in my building, we don't have a back door, and it was basically presented that DuPont, which is behind our building, but again, we don't have a back door or access there, will be our only delivery access, because on 24th and on Hennepin, we won't have any ability to receive deliveries from our delivery people. For my business, cats, you know, we get cats coming in every single day, and they won't be able to be dropped off very easily or picked up. And I don't know if you've ever walked blocks with a cat in a carrier in the cold or the rain, or it doesn't make for a good time. And it also presents issues for my business in that aspect that are definitely unique to me. But again, my entire building, we don't have a back door to access DuPont, so we can't get deliveries. And we just don't see how businesses and their needs are being accommodated by the system. There hasn't been any proof. That's all I gotta say.
We're at our time, but I'll just ask if anybody else wants to, any other guests? Otherwise, we can close the public comment period. Steve, I saw you raise your hand, and I do want to acknowledge the team member, project team members. We did only ask you to be here till 10, so you are certainly entitled to, are allowed to leave. The advisory board, we can continue to meet. I want to be respectful of the time of the project team. Mm-hmm. Recognize that I'm sure they have other meetings today, but so feel free to peel off. But thank you all, Jessica, Jeanette, Alan, and your team for joining us for this presentation. Very quickly, I don't know that you hit it on your presentation, but there is a public meeting next week. Can you just make sure everybody knows of that?
Yes, there is one open house next week, January 13th. So all of the details on how to log into that meeting are available on the project website. And just as a reminder, I know Jonette mentioned this a while ago in the presentation, but again, all of the information, cross sections, design layout, the details of the recommendation, all of those things, as well as a full recording of the presentation is available on the website. So if you can't attend or don't want to attend and prefer to share your comments with us just via the comment form that's available on the website, you can also do that. So thanks for letting us take up your time this morning. We appreciate that, and we'll connect with you soon.
Okay,
Steve?
I have one comment based on what you said, the recommendation on the plan. I think that my only hope is that it is plural instead of singular. Right now you have, in my opinion, a singular plan in two different forms and not a third or a fourth option. So if you would just work on that instead of presenting a hard and fast program and shutting everything down, that would be very appreciative to me. Thank you.
Thanks,
I would
Steve.
like to,
I'll just remind that we started again with multiple options that we shared at the original open house. We dialed that down to 2, and now this is the recommended design. The feedback that we've heard in the past is that at least from from what we've heard from Tom, is that he wants the street rebuilt as is, and that's not with transit improvements as part of BRT, but essentially the same cross section. And that's never been on the table, and it's nothing that we've been able to move forward with. Again, this is a project that has much newer policy guidance than when this was constructed 65 years ago. So I actually do need to go to another meeting, and I'm sure that others on the call do as well. So again, appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you all. Tom, you had something you wanted to add.
Yeah, is it appropriate for us to take a motion as an advisory board?
Board has the discretion to make a motion. Yes.
Okay. I would like to make a motion that the Lowry Hill Special Service District Advisory Board asks the mayor, the city council and mayor to have Public Works prepare another more business and property owner and resident friendly option for the avenue. Businesses have virtually universally expressed displeasure with the proposed option and its impact on them. Despite requests from the city, from Public Works for details of how the proposed project supports the city's goals, they have not been able to provide those details, and we would therefore respectively request that another more business-friendly, resident-friendly option be prepared.
So Tom, that's fine. Can I just ask you to drill that down to your concise motion? That was a lot to put in a motion.
Yeah. Okay.
Distill it down, and we'd be happy to have the board consider it.
Okay. I saw the Lowry Hill Special Service Districts asked the city council and mayor to have Public Works prepare another option for their consideration that is more business, resident, and property friendly on the avenue, with the reinstatement of additional parking. Substantial additional parking, including the reinstatement of substantial additional parking.
Okay, still a really long motion, Tom. I'm sorry.
Tom, can I help you?
Steve, go for
please,
it.
please.
All right.
I'm not trying to dissuade the conversation. I'm just
no.
That is
I know what he's trying to do.
Please go for it, Steve.
We need to make a resolution and a vote to, instead of having a singular option, have another option that's business friendly. So I think the motion should be that we would like an additional option instead of, we'd like to have a plural option instead of a singular option. So I would say that maybe even the fact that we'd like to have a meeting with the mayor.
Okay, well, a request is not typically done in a motion, so I'm trying to help you guys here so that
I'd like to make a motion that there's another business-friendly plan that is proposed to the group.
Okay, that is succinct.
How about to the city council and mayor? How about to the city council and mayor, Steve? Because that's who counts in the vote.
Yeah.
So perhaps a little guidance. As a board, you can make a motion to not recommend or not be in support of the current design with a desire for a new plan to be brought forward by Public Works. I'm just trying to think,
Yeah,
in terms of the purview of this board, where
Right.
your jurisdiction lies, and clearly you can make a motion that is not in support of what was just presented, with the ask that a new proposal be brought before the city council. Michael, some thoughts on that? In
Yeah,
terms
I'm
of
trying
getting
to
the words
craft
right?
this based on this conversation, if beg your indulgence, the group's indulgence for
the
just another
Lowry
second.
Special Service District recommends against the planned option presented to it by Public Works and requests that another option be provided.
I think
That
that worked.
That seems to be concise and falls within the board's purview.
I second it.
A few minutes to get there, but I think we got there, and I think I've captured it, and hopefully between what I've captured and what David has captured, we'll get that.
Michael, let's
so-
for the record though, if you could read what you have written so far so that the board can take a vote. Do we have that written down?
Give me 1 second. I've got most of it, and
Andrew, I appreciate your help.
Well, we want to make sure it's correct in the minutes, so it's best that we spend
appreciate
5
it.
minutes in getting
I
it written out
appreciate
now.
Okay, I'm just letting you know, okay?
Appreciate it.
give me 1 second.
I wasn't even able to do it.
How's this sound? The Lowry Hill SSD Advisory Board recommends that the City Council and Mayor reject the proposed plan option as presented and requests that another option be prepared.
I second that.
Well, you made it, Steve. I second it. How about?
So
Michael
Steve
can't make
made
the
it.
Yeah, Michael can't make the motion.
Right.
Yeah.
Motion, Steve. Further discussion on the motion. If not, we'll take a vote on the motion to recommend that the City Council and Mayor reject the proposed plan option as presented and request that another option be prepared. On that motion, Tom Fletcher,
Aye.
Steve Havoc.
Aye.
We do not have our third advisory board member. So that motion passes. We will craft that, and it will be passed along as needed to get it through the system. So that with that, we have concluded our agenda, and we are 10 minutes over our time. So out of respect for everyone's time, I'll ask if there's a motion to adjourn. Other than to add that we are finalizing our 2022 meeting schedule, and we will be sending out a hold the date for the spring meeting of the advisory board. Just wanted everybody to know that. Also, it is possible but unlikely that our next meeting would be held remotely. The City Council has currently extended the emergency order through the middle of February, so it is likely by the time we meet, it will probably be in person, but who knows? Just giving you a heads up. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Good. With that, we are adjourned. Thank you,
All in favor?
everyone.
Mike, you got to vote. All in favor?
All in
Aye.
favor? That is approved
Aye.
without opposition.
Yeah. And I have one final comment now that we're adjourned. According to Lisa Goodman, she does not know, she does not have a good feel on the city council. So she said that whatever our efforts are should be 100% with the mayor.
Steve, I am actively working on that, and some other
Hey,
people are actively working on
Guys,
that.
we're still
We gotta go.
recording this
We gotta go.
part.
Yeah.
We
That's
gotta go.
okay. I don't